This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Ayin Tes, and we're holding on Ayin Ches Amid Beis. We are 3 lines from the bottom. A short piece of Gemara before we dive a bit deeper into Tashlumim of Daled Vehei. Bayi Rav Papa, the Gemara begins with a Shayla of Rav Papa. What happens if Ganva Kata Umachra Mahu? What is the story? If someone steals an animal, and instead of just straight up doing Mechira, which would thereby be part of the classical Tvicha Mechira, and thereby the Chiyav of Daled Vehei, what he did is he was kata. He cut off a limb of the animal's body, and therefore the question over here is that called a shinoi to the behema? Me, I'm reading my degan of Holoi Zavin. That which he stole, he didn't sell. Or that which he sold, he didn't exclude anything. It was a complete mechira. It happens to be you're just missing a leg, says the Gemara, Teku. And now we dive into on the last line of Ayin Chesem and Beis, Tanu Rabbanan. Let's dive deeply into the halachas of Tvicho Mechira and the Tashlumim of Daled Vehei. Ganav v'nasan la'acher. Someone stole an animal, gave it to another person, and v'tavach, that other person was a teveach for him. If you look at the bottom Rashi says, it's not talking about that he gave it to him as a matana. Why? So then even if he was not teveach, he's mechayev on the fact that he gave it to him, because that would be considered like a mechira. The question over here is, he made his friend a shliach, a messenger, to slaughter the animal for him. Ganav v'nasan la'acher v'tavach, and that person then indeed slaughters it. Or ganav v'nasan la'acher, he gives it to someone else, umachar, and that someone else sells it for him. Or as we turn over to Ayin Tesam and Aleph, ganav v'hikdish, if he stole the animal and then he was a makdish it. Or ganav v'hikif, he stole the animal and he sold it on credit. Ganav v'hichlif, he stole the animal and he now exchanged it for another item, meaning he bartered the animal away. And as everyone realizes, these are all numerous scenarios of a form of tvicha, of a form of mechira. And the question is, do all these cases conform to the rules of Daled Vehei? Continues the Gemara on the top line of Ayin Tesam and Aleph. Ganav v'nasan b'matana. He stole it and he gave it as a present. Ganav upara chayvai. He used the animal to pay back a debt. Ganav upara be'kefai. He stole it and used the animal to pay for something he bought on credit. Ganav v'shalach savlanus bebeis chamav. He stole the animal and he sent it as a gift for the upcoming wedding to his father-in-law's house. In all of these scenarios, says the Braisa, Mishalem Tashlume Kefel. Even though perhaps these don't seem to be the regular Tvicha Mechira, says the Gemara, this is included in the dictum of Tvicha Mechira, and therefore there will indeed be Tashlumim of Daled Vehei. Says the Gemara, Maika Mashmalon. On the fourth line of Ayin Tesam and Aleph, what's the Chiddush? Explains the Gemara, you know what the Chiddush is? Ashmeinon Reisha. The first case, which says, Ganav v'nasan la'acher v'tavach, and that person slaughters it for him. The Chiddush is, the shliach l'dvar aveira. The Chiddush is that he, the shliach, the messenger, is acting on your behalf, and therefore it's considered that yesh shliach lidvar aveira, that af al gav, even though tibachol atayra kula, of course we know ein shliach lidvar aveira, which I'm sure was the question that was bothering everyone. What do you mean yesh shliach? We know ein shliach lidvar aveira. We know divrei Rav and divrei Talmud. Who are you going to listen to? Someone tells you to jump off a building, you're going to listen? Of course not. So I tell you to do an Aveira, of course you're not going to listen. So normally we say, hey, Shliach L'Dvar Aveira. Why is this case any different? Hacha, the reason over here, Yeshlech l'dvar avera my taima, because says the Torah with regard to the payments of Dalid v'hei v'tavchai u'machroi. Says the Torah, if he slaughters it or if he sells it. And from here we learn out ma mechira. Just like in order to sell an item, it's impossible to sell an item if you don't have another person. You need a recipient. So too, an interesting chiddush, a stretch. So too, if you perform the tvicha, just like by the mechira, it needs another person to purchase it. Says the Gemara, so too, if you perform the tvicha in some mannerism, we're going to call it yesh shliach ledvar avera. Therefore, since he's teveach on your behalf, therefore there is a tashlumim of dalad vehei. And chiddush number 2 of this brisa is vashmi'inan seifa Ganav v'hektish. The Seifa is teaching us also a chiddush that if someone steals it and gives it to hektish, mali machar lehedye, mali machar l'shamayim, that giving it to hektish is akin to selling it. Because what's the difference if you sell it to a friend or you sell it to shamayim, and therefore there will be as well tashlumim of Dalid v'hei. We continue with the Mishnah. Ganav b'rishos habaylim. If you stole an animal from the rishos, the possession of the owner, v'tavach u'machar chutz mershusam, and you don't slaughter or sell it in that rishos, you do it outside that rishos. Oishay ganav chutz mershusam. Or if you steal an animal not from the rishus of the owner, and then you take it into the rishus of the owner and you shecht it there. Or if it all happened outside of the rishus of the owner. In all of these scenarios, says the Mishnah that in all of these cases, part in the owner's rishos, part not in the owner's rishos, nothing in the owner's rishos, there are payments of dalad v'hei. Aval, continues the Mishnah, however, if it all, the entire act, from the geneva to the tvicha or the mechira, all happened in the possession of the original bailim, then the halacha is pater, there is no payments of Dalid Vahei. Part A of the Mishnah. Continues the Mishnah, part B. If the Ganav was pulling the animal out of the owner's rishos, and the animal drops dead, while it's still in the owner's possession, Potter, the Ganav is Potter. If he picks it up, or he takes it out and the animal dies, then chayiv, then the ganaf is chayiv. And finally, part C of the Mishnah, nasnu lebachayrais b'noi. If he gave it to the kayin as redemption for his bachar, oy lebal chayiv, or he gave it to someone who he owed money to, l'shaymer chinam, he gave it to an unpaid watchman, l'shayel tabar, l'noisisachar tarent, l'seicher, to a paid watchman or to a renter, and any of these people are pulling the animal out and the animal dies, Potter, then the ganav is Potter. So 3 parts of the Mishnah. Part A of the Mishnah dealing with in which rishos, in whose possession was the geneva, was the tvicha, etc. Part B dealing with when the animal drops dead, whether it's in the rishos of the bailim, the ganav is Potter, outside the rishos will be chayiv. And part C in the Mishnah dealing with giving this animal, whether it's for payments for a bachar or to a shaymer, etc., as well, there will be a pitur. And with that, we continue in the Gemara. And of course, as always, the shayla of the Gemara might seem a bit odd, but we're bringing it in as the Mishnah is going to be the Raya. Ba'i Ameimar. Tiknai Mishicha B'Shaimrim Oiloi. Was there a takana of Mishicha by a Shomer or not? Says Rashi, what does this mean? Do we say that a watchman is not obligated in watching the item until he performs an act of Mishicha, he pulls the item that he is watching, or not? Amar Rav Yemar, the first white line, Tashem, I'll bring you a raya, says Rav Yemar. Says our Mishnah, and what did the Mishnah teach? Potter. Says the Gemara, what does the Mishnah mean that there is a Patur? My love is the Patur not Shaimer. That the Shaimer is Potter. And therefore, what do you see from here? You see that there is a takana that the Shaimer has to do an act of acquisition. He has to do a Mishicha. And because he never performed the Mishicha, because it was all Bershas Bailim, the possession of the owner, therefore there is a Patur, and therefore we have a Raya to the Shaila of Ameimar, do you need Mashiach or not? The answer is yes. Amar Lei responds Ameimar, no Raya on the fourth line. Lo Ganaf. What does it mean? Is Potter? It means the Ganaf is the one that is Potter, not the Shomer. Ask the Gemara, Tanalei Reisha, but the Reisha already taught us. Tana Ganav Sheganav Beis Abailim, V'Tana Ganav Sheganav Beis Shomer. So says the Gemara, the Mishnah already taught such a differentiation. Excuse me. Let's go back. That was the kasha. The kasha was a tanilei reisha. We already learned this in the reisha. That what is the din of meshicha by the ganif. On that answers the Gemara. No, tani ganav sheganav mi beis bailim. Tani ganav sheganav mi beis shaimer. Amar Rav Ashi says Rav Ashi, no, lo sitchi mali ganav sheganav beis shaimer. Mali ganav sheganav beis bailim. There's no difference. So why are you saying such a differentiation? Elalav shaimer. Must be like we thought in the Havamina that it's the Shomer, it's the watchman, the one doing the Meshicha. And therefore, Ushma Mina concludes the Gemara, Tiknu Meshicha B'Shoimrim, Shma Mina, 4 lines from the bottom, says the Gemara, we do indeed have such a Raya. And Itzmar Nami, the Gemara further proves the Raya. Amar Rav Yechlan Kederash Tiknu Meshicha B'Lekuchais. Just like by a purchaser, there's the kind of Meshicha of pulling the item. Okay, shame, and just like Shakar Kenigdim because of Bishar B'Chazaka, to acquire land with money, document, or making a chazaka on the item. When you rent something, because Bishar B'Chazaka. Schiras demai, says more. What's this case of schiras that you are talking about? As we turn over to Ayin Tes Amid Beis, what's this case of schiras that you're telling me that it's going to be the same din? If you're going to tell me that you're renting a movable item, there's no such thing as a star for metaltlin. I'm Rav Chisda. It's talking about schiras de karka, and that's when we're going to have this. We're going to have this din. Continues the Gemara, 3 lines down. Amar Rav Elazar. Says the Gemara, we've been learning about the chiyuvim of kefel, of dalid, vehei. Says the Gemara, all these dinim, explains Rav Elazar, is only when it's a regular case of geneva, which is in broad daylight. However, the opposite. It's only when it's a geneva, which is not in broad daylight. But if it's gizila, which is in broad daylight, you don't have these chiyuvim. Amar Rav Elazar, Ra'u shehitim b'charshit. Says Rav Elazar, people see a man hiding in the forest to try to steal animals. V'tavach, and then what happens? Not only does he steal them, he slaughters umachar. B'sham tashlu meidalad vei. Ask the Gemara, he never did a mashiach on the items. I'm Rav Chisda. No. Shechshu b'makal, he hit the animal with a stick, causing it to move. That's the same thing as doing a mashiach. Amri, kivin deruah, gazlan hu. What do you mean? But if you see him steal, he doesn't have a status of a ganof. He has a status of a gazlan. And therefore, what? Look at Rashi in the 4th narrow line. And he's not comparable to a ganof. Bifnei shnayim. The hasam avgav the chazilei. Sharin shi lo mistafi minayu. Tememar lo minayu sheklenu midi. Aval charshim. Mera lacholi. This guy, everyone sees that he's hiding out in the pasture. Anyone who's not afraid of the whole world is a gazlan. Who by gazlan, there aren't such payments. Answers the Gemara. Amar Rav Avua. Kivan. Tika mitamri. Nope, I skipped. Let's go back for a second. Says the Gemara before Rav Avua. Kivan tika mitamri minayu ganavu. No, since he's hiding, he's called a ganaf. Says the Gemara, so what's the case of a gazlan? He's hiding in order to get the animals, but everyone knows about it. So what is going to be the case of a gazlan? Amar Rav Avua, says Rav Avua, 8 lines down. The first one line is Amar Kigain ben Yahu ben Yayada. He was a gazlan. Shenemar b'igzal as a chanit miyada mitzi v'argiu b'chanitoi, and he robbed the spear from the hands of the Mitzrayim, and he cut it with his own spear, meaning more in broad daylight. Like those in Shechem, Shenamar v'sim l'bali Shechem me'arbim me'aravim, al Rashi Aharim. They set up ambushes on the mountain tops. V'yigzulu as kol asher yavar aleim badarech. They saw anyone who passed by on the road. Asked the Gemara, Ravua, my time lo amar mehai. Why doesn't Rav Avua say for the second pasuk by Shechem? They were hiding also at some level, so not a gazlan. No, the only fear is people shouldn't see them and run from them, but avad is still at some level in broad daylight, and therefore it has a din of a gazlan. But continues the Gemara, about 15 lines down, the first word line is Inshi Shalu Talmidav as Rav Yochanan mid Zakai. They asked the Rebbe the following shayla that we're discussing right now. We don't understand, they asked the Rebbe. Why by a ganef are we being more machmir kefel dalid vehei more than a gazlan? Amar lehen Yochanan responded, Zeh heshvid kavod eved lekavod kainai. This one equates the honor of the servant to the king, and this one does not. As example, asa ayin shalmata kilu einay raya. Why? Because he makes the eye below as if he doesn't see. V'ayin shalmata, and the ear below kilu einay shemas. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Havei hamamakim Hashem l'satir itzam. Those who hide from Hashem. Listar itzav hayam machsheich me'isayam. Their deeds are done in darkness, etc. So it's much worse a person who's living a double life because he doesn't think anyone sees him, which means he's not afraid of Hashem. And they say Hashem will not see, and the God of Yaakov will not understand. Tanya, we learned in a brisa to explain what's going on. What is the mashal? Rav Gamliel lamad davar daimeh. Shnei bnei adam sheyabeir. V'asa mishta echad zamenes bnei yair v'lo zamenes bnei hamelech. One invited all the townspeople, but didn't invite the king. V'echad lo zamenes bnei yair v'lo zamenes bnei hamelech. Eizeh mehen anshe meruba. Which gets a worse punishment? Of course, Avi Yomer zeshe zimenes bnei yair v'lo zimenes bnei hamelech. You already invited people. You invited people from the city. But you did not invite from the king's kids. Such a person is the one that gets a larger punishment, and that's the reason why the Gana, who thinks he's doing it in private and no one sees him, he gets a worse punishment. Amar Rameir comments, Rameir Barei Kamagadol Kaichai Shel Melacha. How powerful his work. Shar Shevil Melachtai, a shar, which one steals, does farm work, which is bought from work, Chamisha. But a seh which does not cause one to be mevatel me malacha, arba, then you pay only 4. It's one shot. Amr Rav Yochanan Zakeh Barei Kama Gadol Kavod Habriis. Shar Shalach Baraglav, you have to pay Chamisha. By the sad, the Ganav at some level exerted himself more. He carried it on his shoulder, and therefore he has to pay less, whereas the Shar did not. Therefore, there's a higher level of payment. We continue with the Mishnah on the bottom narrow lines of Ayin Tes Amid Beis. Says the Mishnah, Ein Megadlin Behema Daka B'Eretz Yisrael. You're not allowed to raise a small animal in Eretz Yisrael. Aval, however, Megadlin B'Surya, you could raise such animal in Syria, Ubimidbar Shel Eretz Yisrael, and in the deserts of Eretz Yisrael. Ein Megadlin Tarnagoylim B'Yushalayim. You can raise chickens in Yerushalayim, Minei HaKacha, because of the karbanos. Like a Hanim Eretz Yisrael, Minei HaTaharos. Ein Megadlin Chazirin, you never let have pigs, B'Chomakam. Adam as a kelev, you can't have a dog. Elam kain hayir kosher b'shal shelas. That's tied with a chain. In parson yishayvim leivanim. What does that let us put on nets to catch the doves? Elam kain hayirachim min yishav lamid ris. Unless it's 30 res from the yishav from a settled area. We'll pick it up from the Gemara of Siyata the Shmaya the next shir.